everyone, welcome to another episode of 5 Art Questions. Today I have the honor to have Lara Alcántara here with me. Lara is an art photographer. She holds a BA in photography from Bard College. She studied there for 2 years and then she transferred to NYU. Lara also got an MFA from ICP in New York City. Lara has had numerous exhibitions in Caracas, Miami, New York, and Paris, and today she will be talking to us about her work in quarantine that has been amazing. Welcome, Lara.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. My quarantine work.
So the first question is for you to tell us a little bit about your previous work and what were you working on before quarantine started?
All right. So just a little thing. Quarantine has been completely self-portraits. And I actually worked on self-portraits for a very long time. I've been a big fan of self-portraits, I think since I started photography, because it was the best way to kind of the concept that I had in my mind I would be able to make it clearer because I was the model. So I didn't have to explain much. I just did my thing and just used myself as a model. And of course, I started when I went to school. I discovered Cindy Sherman and her film stills, and I completely fell in love with them and how that whole thing about getting yourself in the movie and making yourself part of that movie. I studied theater too. I did a minor in theater, so I've always kind of loved being in front of the camera. So it's a perfect combination for me to do both. I've been in PR in fashion in New York City for a long time, and I've been doing a ton of fashion photography, very conceptual fashion photography. So that's what I was doing before I got locked up for 4.5 months. Yeah, so then quarantine came in and we're all basically stuck at home. We have our kids, our husbands, the whole, thing. And I'm not the kind of person that loves looking too much at the news because it kind of it disrupts my own reality, my like imaginative, fantastic reality. So I decided to start taking images of what I was going through and trying to figure out how making that work would kind of take all the stress and the anxiety and the fear of everything that was going on and just kind of push it away and make my own scenario of what I was going through photography.
So that sort of answers the second question, but it's amazing. The second question is, or was, or you can expand on it, which is how did you, or how did this new series started, which you were talking about, and what made you start taking self-portraits in quarantine? But I believe
well, I mean, I can expand on it a little bit. I think that when you're used to shooting with a lot of people, especially when you're in fashion, there's always like a makeup person, and there's your assistant, and there's huge lights, and there's a backdrop, and a studio, and an art director. There's so many people involved that the work kind of is never really yours completely. It's like a teamwork. And when you find yourself in confinement with, 2 travel lights and not, nothing else, no assistants, no makeup, no nothing, except for a space. You have to, my thing was like, okay, so if I'm going to do laundry again, which I was completely sick of doing laundry by the second week, then why not make a photo that would express my like disbelief that I had to do laundry like 3 times a day. So the first photograph that came out of this whole thing was me sticking myself inside of the laundry, like the washing machine. Yes. And because I work in fashion and I have a lot of, clothes that I was supposed to be doing for collaborations for my Instagram account, I was like, well, might as well just use them, even though if I'm not going out in the summer, in like spring mood. Yes. So I put on this like gorgeous dress that a brand gave me to do a collaboration, and these gorgeous like shoes, and I just stuck myself in the laundry and took some pictures. And mind you that at this same moment my little kid is like in class probably like 7 feet away. So she turns around, she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm making work because mommy needs to like de-stress. So that's how it all started. It started because I was the only person there and I had the equipment and I had the vision to just kind of go for it. And one of the things that I did learn about quarantine is to as artists, I think we judge ourselves a lot, and we, we're not all like Vic Muniz, which is this artist that would throw out anything. He doesn't care if it's good or bad. He just like produces, produces, produces. And usually we edit ourselves a lot. So I decided to just kind of stop that and just produce and make work like crazy. If it was good or bad, or I thought whatever, I would just post it anyway. And that's how it all kind of started.
Amazing. Yes, it's I've been following it since it started, and I've been a fan.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been interesting, especially on social media, because of the way that people actually identify a lot with the images, because they're also going through. Especially, I think that the women who follow me, they are really identifying themselves with those same images.
Frustration of being.
Yeah, the frustration of being at home with your kids, and like, having to cook 3 times a day and cleaning, and like, it's just kind of like, ah.
So the third question, you were mentioning your inspiration and your fascination with Cindy Sherman before, and the third question actually mentions Cindy Sherman, which is, would you consider Cindy Sherman an influence, and if so, how and why?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Cindy Sherman and Sally Mann and maybe Julia Margaret Cameron, which is one of the first ever like female photographers that ever really made it somewhere. Um, I mean, Julia Margaret Cameron used to work with a large format, but all her images were super romantic, and it was just about people that came in and out of her house. And people actually thought that, well, her husband gave her a camera because he thought that she just needed something to do, and then she started taking these amazing images. So it all started through there, through going to school and learning a little bit about the history of photography and where it comes from. And especially, I had an interest in female photographers, so I started investigating a lot about that. And then I hit Cindy Sherman, I hit Sally Mann, which I especially her first series of the family series is one of my favorite ever books in the history of photography. It's contemporary history, but still. I think, for example, there's an Argentinian called Alessandra Sanguinetti who makes these beautiful stories. Also, her first series was my favorite of them all. I've always been a big fan of books, of like fantastic books, like Alice in Wonderland, and like the story of Ophelia, and the stories of, I don't know. I mean, there's so many, like Peter Pan. I suffer from Peter Pan syndrome, which means I never want to grow up. So like keeping myself in that world, especially if you have kids, then that's kind of also part of the inspiration. But Cindy Sherman and her film stills, I think, would be kind of that moment where I decided to just go ahead and do a lot of self-portraiture.
Amazing. So talking about your inspiration in other fields, in art history, as well as in just literature as well, I've been seeing that your art studies are evident in your work, and how you take little pieces of different things in art history, and you make them relevant today. Like, just, I believe it was yesterday, you posted a self-portrait of recreating Ophelia by John Everett Millett, which is this quintessential work of Victorian art, and it's amazing how you brought it into our field today in quarantine. So
Yeah.
how do you think this background in art history is relevant in your work, or how has this been an influence?
I mean, I think art history is basically everything is part of the inspiration. But when you're going through school, I mean, when you are studying photography as a career, you do go through a lot of art history. Art history is like at least a class every semester, and you can't fail it, of course. So, but the fact that there's a lot of visual material there, and there's so many different stories about, I mean, the work was so conceptual in a way in the history of art, that you kind of start putting little pieces together in your brain as an image maker. And for example, the photo that I did yesterday, I was like, well, I love the character of Ophelia. I think that Ophelia is one of those characters in Shakespeare that hasn't been really talked about that much, because you see her a little bit here, a little bit there, and you know that but at the end she's like this girl who's like completely in love with Hamlet, and nobody really cares in a way, and that's why tragic end happens, you know, and it's kind of a beautiful moment where she comes out in with flowers, and but she wanted to be desired by this person. um, and the image through that piece of work that you just talked about has, like, how do you bring that into quarantine? How do you make, I mean, I would have loved to do it in a creek somewhere, and but no, I can't. So there's a sink, and I had flowers, and I had this beautiful dress, and I was like, might as well just do Ophelia in my house, the way that I've been doing all of my other images. I don't know if you saw, like, in my Instagram, there's a photo of the girl with the pearl earring, and
Yes.
it's kind of like me taking like a retrospective, like a introspective of the person in the frame, and the frame is me dressed as the girl with the pearl earring. And both images are made very differently. One is more contemporary than the other, but it's still like the looking into yourself. So one thing that also came out of quarantine is that there's books around my house everywhere, you know, art history books, photo history books. I've seen every single documentary about any artist that you could possibly imagine on TV, and all those things come to that moment where you kind of put things together and decide, well, this is what I want to talk about. And you discover that, you know, your muse is kind of like Siddhartha, you know, it's like yourself. You
Yeah.
find that you don't really need, you need all these things, but at the end, the biggest inspiration to move yourself forward is yourself as an artist.
And the Last Supper I also saw, which
Oh my
was
God, The Last Supper is my favorite. Yeah, The Last Supper. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of that story, because in that story, Jesus basically tells everybody to come to this dinner because he wanted to tell everyone that he knew that somebody was going to betray him. And in the worldwide situation, we were betrayed by a country who didn't really, you know, there's all these things behind it, and you know, we're basically, the world closed completely because somebody completely betrayed us. So I decided, well, you know, I'm gonna do The Last Dinner because you know, there's this person that is has gone through betrayal, and then there's, if you really look at the image, Jesus has an apostle putting Purell in one hand, and in the other hand there's like a piece of bread, and then there's another one of me in the corner singing like a Mexican ranchera with a bottle of vodka, and then there's the selfie apostle who's like, whatever, I'm just gonna take a selfie, and there's the fashionista apostle, and there's one that's kind of like trying to just get away. There's like different characters, and there's like flour on the table, anything that's derived from flowers, from like goldfish to crackers, and there's medication on the table. It's just kind of like a modern version of it. And all 8 apostles that are on there are all me, and 4 of them just didn't show up, I guess, because of the situation of the world, because there are some countries that also were like, whatever.
yeah,
So yeah, it all comes down to that.
amazing. It was very, very clever. So the fifth question is, after quarantine is over, do you plan to expand this project? Would you like to have an exhibition? And what are your plans for the future with this project or in general?
Well, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, an exhibition would be great. I am working right now on a book, with, you know, a couple of statements from some people that have been following my work throughout these past 4 months. So those texts will be included in the book. The book is more of a portfolio, I would guess. There are talks with some people to do a show here in New York and one in Miami, so I'm super excited about that. And yeah, I would love to, you know, like hit the point where I, like, there's a confirmation of a show and we're going to put it together and we'll have the book together too. And but yeah, expanding on this theme of self-portraiture, I think will be kind of my thing again from now on. I think that during quarantine, one of the things that happened also was like, I kind of really discovered that the only thing that really fulfills anything in myself as a person and as a human being and my soul and everything is making work. We're completely distracted by so many things in life, like especially when you're a parent, there's so much that you have to do that you kind of sometimes forget like what your path is. And once you find it, you know, especially at my age, I'm like, no, we're sticking to it. So yeah, I'm pushing for it. I've applied to a ton of, competitions and things going around, and yeah, we're working, we're pushing.
Amazing. It's very inspiring. And
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
thank you. And so you can follow Lara Alcántara on Instagram. You should follow her if you don't already. And thank you so much again for joining me in 5 Art Questions. And I hope you stay tuned for the next episodes. Bye.
Thank you.